joining us for what is the final and, as always, the best talk of the day. So we've got two people talking to you today. We're going to start off with David Pleasance, who's going to give you an update, and then he's going to be joined by Trevor Dickinson, and they're going to come up and together they will, no doubt, enthrall you with some fantastic stories and answer some questions and all those wonderful things they do. But for now, I'll hand over to David. Over to you.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to be here once again. This is an event that I think I've supported it every year since it started. I think so. Yeah, and because it's very nice people. And I'll tell you a little story, actually. Steve, who obviously is one of the people responsible for setting this up, I met Steve, although I didn't remember. I think it was in 1999, just prior to me and taking my first wife to Australia, and we were at a car boot sale selling everything. He bought a Commodore 64 for me, he tells me. There he is, yeah. Yeah. So that's how long we've known each other. So I do tend to try and support this. Now, this is very, very brief because I'm just going to give an overview of things, of what have happened really over the last probably 4 or 5 years or so. And then I'm going to announce a new project, which I'm hopeful that you're going to enjoy. Okay, talking about Commodore The Inside Story, that was the first book that I attempted to write. And I never thought I was capable of writing a book, simply because I've never been trained and I didn't even pass my GCE in English. So, but I think because all the stories that I was telling at these events, people really enjoyed them, and they're all real true stories. I was sort of really lambasted into writing the book. And I have to say that when I finished writing my part of the book, I read it back and I didn't like it at all. For me, it was more a story about David Pleasance than it was about Commodore. But then I thought, well, hang on, this is stories through my ears and my eyes. It can't really be anything else. But for me, it was not sufficient to publish a book that was just my views of things. So I contacted many of the people within Commodore and asked them if they would write something about their experiences from within Commodore. So I've got a lot of people involved in the book, including Dave Haney, R.J. Michael, Beth Richards. She was the engineer designing the CD1200, which never got launched. Other general managers from Commodore Benelux. I got Dr. Peter Kittle from Commodore Germany, and a few people not from within Commodore, but who worked with Commodore. And they've all written their own chapters, and I didn't change anything, and not one word. So whatever they wrote is what got printed. And it's been a very successful book, I have to say. It's now been printed in German and Italian. It's just been translated into Polish, ready to print, which I think we'll be running a Kickstarter for very shortly. It's also currently being translated into Latin Spanish. That's in Argentina. There is a retro computer museum in conjunction with the university. Not only are they translating The Inside Story, they're also translating all the books that Trevor and I wrote as well. So then we produced Vultures to Vampires, and what happened there was that I just had this idea that I wanted to tell the story of what was happening, or what happened really to Commodore and its IPs and patents and logos and trademarks after ESCOM's bankruptcy, because they had it for about a year, and as you know, it was a disaster. There was all these vultures coming in, some people wanting to do the genuine, honest thing, and some people just wanted to make a quick buck. But I wanted the story to go from that point up into and talk about the latest technology. And at that time, the latest technology being developed was the Vampire board from Apollo. So I went to the Vampire boys and said, hi, can I use you, because I think I like the title from Vultures to Vampires, is it okay if I use your logo and I'll give you a chapter in the book, which they agreed to do. I then reached out to other people saying, would anybody collaborate with me? And Trevor, my mate sitting behind you there, he reached out and said, how about we co-author it? The truth of the matter is that Trevor's written just about everything. That's the absolute truth. I've hardly done anything. I've done a lot of the work, but I didn't do any of the research. And Trevor already had quite a bit. But what we did not expect was that it was going to be 3 volumes. So what happened was that I faced a challenge, because at the time that we were publishing Volume 1, I got approached by a publishing company called Unicorn, and they wanted to distribute my books. They wanted the Inside Story and Volume 1 and Volume 2, because by then we already knew about it. And basically they asked, I was just about to do a print of Volume 1 and a print of the Inside Story, and I said, they told me they were going to distribute all over the world, in all of the airports and, you know, the usual suspects, say train stations, so on and so forth. So I said, okay, well, I'm now doing a print run, how many do you want? And they asked me to send them 1,000 of each books, which seemed to me to be the reasonable number if they're an international distribution company. So I went ahead and did that. I didn't hear anything from them for ages, and then suddenly I did contact them, and they'd sold 200 of each, that's all. And then they returned the rest back to me. And that absolutely crippled me, cash flow-wise, because I'd paid all the money out for the books and obviously was not getting anything back. Now, the need for the second volume, when that came about, I was very nervous, let's say, about doing what Brian Bagnall had done before. Brian Bagnall was doing a Kickstarter, got people to back him, and then he'd say, I need to do another book, and he'd charge them again. And he did that 3 times in a row. I didn't really want to do that, so I made a proposition with Trevor's agreement that I offered all backers, Kickstarter backers of Volume 1, to buy Volume 2 at half retail price, so at $17.50, plus postage, of course. Now, I then went through a very bad period. I was in hospital for a while, and in fact, I lost about 4 months of productivity. And that meant I missed my printing deadline for Christmas for Volume 2. And in the meantime, of course, we then got struck by COVID. And the bottom line is that everything went up in price hugely. The fact is that I lost money on that Volume 2 to all the people that I'd given half price, because it was a matter of goodwill from me, but I lost the money. Anyway, that's life. We have to move on. Then we determined that we needed a Volume 3. I decided not to run a Kickstarter for Volume 3, because I had run a Kickstarter for Volume 2, but because I'd already gone back to the backers and offered them a half price, the Kickstarter for Volume 2 failed. I kind of knew it would. Anyway, I decided not to do a Kickstarter for Volume 3, which in hindsight was probably not the best decision. Everything had increased, so the price increased up to £39 a book. That's what I had to sell it for. I'm not making a huge amount of money out of these things, to be honest with you. Obviously, plus postage and packing. Anyway, here today I've got all the books on sale, and they're at reduced prices, so if anybody wants to buy them, they're as cheap as you're going to get them. Basically, the Inside Story I'm charging £15, Vultures to Vampires is £25, that's Volume 1. But if you buy both, you get them for £30. Vultures to Vampires 2 and 3, £35 each, but if you buy them both, you get them for £50. So it's a very good opportunity if you want to buy the books, and of course, I and Trevor will sign the books for you. Oh yeah, well, I didn't tell them that, you know. That goes on the credit card without them seeing. Anyway, then there was a new project. I was approached by Microseat Publishing, a German company, and they were writing a book called 68,000 Flame Wars, and it tells the story of the battle between the Atari 520 ST and and the Amiga 500. So I wrote my part of it, and Darryl Still from Atari wrote his part of it. But it's a fantastic book, and it's got 400 pages. They paid me in books. So, but that's okay. I sold them all very, very quickly, and it's not a problem. Now, I was hoping to have some here today, but I sold the last couple last week at the event in Walsall. And I've ordered some more, but they haven't arrived in time. They'll arrive in the next few days. They will be at Kickstart in Nottingham at the end of this month, if anybody's going there, which is a fantastic event. Anyway, that book, as I said, it's a really good book. It's 400 pages. It weighs 1.4 kilos, when my books weigh about 1.1 or 1.2, so you get some idea. Okay. I recently started adding clothing. Everywhere I go, obviously I was only selling books, but it's occurred to me, people were asking, why don't I sell Commodore clothing and so on and so forth. So I've got hoodies and I've got T-shirts and so on and so forth. I also decided that I was going to design my own brand, because I was fed up with people saying you can't use this and you can't use that and you pay for this and pay for that. So I started with this branding, which is proud to be an Amigaholic. And I must tell you the story about that. It involves Trevor again. Trevor and I were in Poland. We were at a thing called the Ami Party, which is in a little town called Chelm. And they are big drinkers. And we just had to patronize with them. Of course, you have to do that. And on the morning after this particular event, they wanted to do a video interview with Trevor and I. So they took us to another pub. We sat down. And the guy said, right, who wants to go first? And Trevor said, there's no easier way to say this. He said, but I'm an Amigaholic. And I said, and I'm his dealer. And that was how that all came about. And it stuck in my mind forever. So I thought, but proud to be an Amigaholic. It's a really good logo. So that's available in. I've got tracksuits and hats. T-shirts I don't have at the moment because they're being printed, but they're not here yet. I've got mugs and key rings and mouse mats and a little zip-up bag for your bits and bobs and things. So everything's on, and you can see on my tables over here. Don't know if I've added this one to it. It's proud to be a Commodorian, because some people are not Amiga fans, but they are huge Commodore fans. And again, I've got T-shirts and other items there. And I think they're great. Now, hats off to Paul Kitching, is my artist. I give him the ideas, and then he comes up with the finished goods. Okay, so yes, I've got T-shirts already down there, lots of colours and lots of sizes. Right, now, what I really want to do today is to announce a brand new book that I'm just about to write. I'm going to launch the Kickstarter probably next week, in fact. This book is called Dare to Dream. It's a vision of what Commodore and Amiga could have been and should have been if Colin Proudfoot, who was my co-MD at Commodore UK, and I had not been cheated out of our management buyout bid, what we would have done with Commodore, how we would have restructured the company and how we would have raised funds in order to support the R&D and so on and so forth. Now, I'm very fortunate because we've now got, obviously, the benefit of hindsight, because there's a lot of things that have happened since then, a lot of new technology. And I'm really pleased to announce that I'm working with Dave Haney. Any of you that are Amiga fans know Dave Haney, one of the engineers, probably the most foresightful engineer that Commodore had. So he's working with me on this. And also I've got assistance from Dr. Ed Hepler, who was the guy that was designing the Ombre. It was the project code name. And that was a whole brand new technology that when we did our due diligence, we were there with the ESCOM guys doing their due diligence, and they didn't even look at this product. Anyway, the new book, uh, I said I'm going to be raising a Kickstarter. So I think the best way, sorry, I'm going backwards. There was something wrong there. The best way I can show you this, just bear with me. This should kick in, I hope. Come on.
Well, hello to all my Amiga Commodore fans around the world. This is David John Pleasance, and I'm really, really excited today because I'm announcing a new Kickstarter for a new book that I'm writing, and I have with me the one and only Dave Haney, as I know most of you know, and he's helping me to write the book. So let's say hello to Dave.
Hi, David, and all my Amiga fans, and the whole community, and even if you don't like me, it's nice to be here. Yeah, I'm going to be working. I've already started, but I'm going to be working on this project with David Pleasance, and hopefully we produce a new speculative book.
Well, everybody, the new book, its title is Dare to Dream. The vision of what Commodore and Amiga could have been, ... should have been, ... And it's telling the story of had Colin Proudfoot, my co-managing director at Commodore UK, and I not been cheated out of our management buyout, exactly what we would have done with Commodore and Amiga.
Well, I'm going to be exploring kind of where the technology could have gone in practical terms and maybe how we get there. You know, like, okay, we don't have an evil management team at Commodore anymore. We have some good guys who know what they want to do. They want to make personal computers. They want to. So where do we push it? We had some nice components to start with, leading into what would have been the buyout. We have the AAA project. We have Ombre. Stuff that's in design but not done yet. So with proper funding and maybe some help from the industry, like, who do we talk to? Who needs our help? Because we were always looking at, we were looking at the company was looking at this very, very slowly when we were trying to sell off the Commodore technologies. Who would actually benefit from what we're working on? And so I'm thinking, like, maybe there's industry partnerships. How do we get big enough to not fail? Is kind of the way I'm looking at it. How do we, how would we have tried to keep Amiga going as long as we could have kept it going? What might we have done differently than it actually happened to Commodore? Well, of course, that was going down the tube. So, we probably wouldn't want it to do that.
Well, we are very lucky because we have the benefit of hindsight. We are now aware of so much more new technology that has been developed over the years, and one big difference that I could guarantee had we won the management buyout from the previous management is that we believed 100% in collaboration. So what we would have done is we would have partnered with anybody who was manufacturing anything that was could enhance or improve on what we were developing, working with them, because obviously it would be financially a much better situation if you're not fighting with somebody, if you work together and share the spoils. So with the benefit of hindsight, this book is going to be really, really intriguing, because in some ways it's a bit fictional, but it won't be fictional because these are things that we would have done.
Yeah, it's a little science fiction, but that's why I call it speculative fiction. Starting here, here's the direction we would have liked to go in, and of course we're going to write about what things going wrong, not so much, maybe a little bit, but things going right, because of course we don't want to tell you another depressing story, since if we're going to extrapolate, we're going to make things come out well. But that's kind of the gist of the project. I'm actually reading through all the Ombre stuff now, but I mean, I already knew that we were in 1993, in 1994. Ed Hepler was working on a GPU, now a real GPU, Turing see when the first one of those actually came out in the mainstream of personal computing, and you'll see it wasn't until like 1999 with Sam Labs. I mean, not Sam Labs, with NVIDIA. So that told you that Commodore was heading in the right directions. We just didn't have the means of getting there because some people had to spend all the money on executive salaries.
Yeah, the other interesting thing to the readers and hopefully the backers of the Kickstarter is that we've actually got Dr. Ed Hepler involved. He's sending us material and stuff, and it's a fascinating thing because it is a new technology that was a new technology at the time that was way ahead of everything else. And the interesting thing for those of you who really know anything about the story is that when Colin and I were undergoing our due diligence, because we, as you know, we plan to bid for the assets, ESCOM were there as well, and they never even looked at Ombre. They didn't even look at it. Whereas Ed Hepler showed it to me. He'd cobbled together software and stuff and showed it to me, and it was mind-blowing what he'd already developed. It was incredible, fabulous. So this book is going to have a lot of meaty stuff in there, and in some ways it's a sad reflection for me, but on the other hand, it's a story that I keep being asked to be told. So hence the book Dare to Dream. So when it comes out, it's going to be a Kickstarter launching very, very soon. Please back it, because without your help we can't get there.
Thank you for listening.
Look, you mentioned the Amigaholic. He didn't really tell the story. The story was, we arrived in Poland. It was about 9 in the morning. Have a drink. Yeah. Have another drink. Have another drink. We got this green stuff that's homemade vodka. Have some of that. So by the time early afternoon, we were plastered, right? Weren't we? Totally plastered. And everyone
You
drinks.
speak for yourself.
Everyone drinks for 2 days running, right? So the next day we were doing a little talk, and they gave us a can of beer each, and we're sitting there with these cans of beer, half cut, talking about hungover, half cut. Although you got up in the middle of the night and went back and joined the party.
Really? I don't remember that.
But yeah, so yes.
It has been known.
I did say, I am an Amigaholic. My name's Trevor Dickinson, I'm an Amigaholic. And you said yes, and I'm his dealer, which got a really good laugh. But when I see Dave Haney there, Dave likes to drink. I guess everyone knows that. He likes to drink. The last show last year in Germany, Amiga 37, somehow...
38 was last year.
It's 37, wasn't it? It's 37. Yes. 37? Yes. Yeah. Anyway, I know that because I had a T-shirt saying Amiga 37, right? Anyway, we ended up in my room. So there was me, Costel from ex-Hyperion, Matthew, and Dave Haney. And I bought a bottle of Shackleton's whiskey. And we sat there and we drank it. And then Dave, eventually, he was jet-lagged. He'd come from the States. I was jet-lagged. I'd come from New Zealand. And I was thinking, what time is it? And it was 4 o'clock in the morning, and Dave had gone to sleep on my bed. And so we said, look, Dave, we've got to get up in 3 hours because we have to go and set things up at the Amiga 37, so you think you should go to bed? And he fortunately did, but it was difficult. So good luck with the book. No, he's great. Dave's really, really good. A really good guy. But it reminds me of another story, and it wasn't Dave Haney this time. It was R.J. Michael. We'd gone, if you remember Amiga 30, 2015, there's a great big shows all over the world. There was one in London, or in Peterborough, which is really good, which we were both at. There was one in...
I live in Peterborough as well.
Yeah. And that was really good. Steve Crittenton had organised the show. It was a fantastic show. the biggest events were in Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and also at the Computer History Museum in the States. You weren't at the Computer History Museum one, but you were at the Amsterdam one, which brought you back into the scene. So you can talk about that when I finish my little story, okay?
Go on.
I don't usually get a chance to talk when David's around, do I? Anyway, I was going to the memorial service for Dave Needle, and he died the year after, 6 months after, 4 months after Amiga 30 in the States. And there was a big memorial service in California, and I've been invited to go and stay with R.J. Michael. And because of the...
Do you people know who R.J. Michael is?
Oh, sorry. How many people are actually Amigans? How many people are Atari? Oh, good. All right.
I told you not to swear.
Yeah, so RJ invited me to stay with him, so we ended up staying at RJ's house with another couple of guys, and Glenn, one of the other developers whose name has just passed me by, McKellar, was it? Anyway, we were staying in the house, and I could tell his wife wasn't happy with having all these people in the house that just turned up and they said, well, Trevor, you've got a room downstairs. It's got a blow-up bed, but it's got a slow leak. And there's a pump, but don't worry, the pump works. It worked every half hour, because every half hour the bed went down. But it was great to actually mix with the Amiga developers, because they still have this bond going back to their time at Commodore. They weren't there at Commodore long, maybe 2-3 years at the most, 4 years possibly, but they have this fantastic bond of a group of people who'd worked together to create something quite magnificent, and it's probably why I'm an Amiga-holic, and a lot of people around here still enjoy and look at the Amiga today. Would you agree with that, Dave?
Oh, totally. In fact, I believe it's bigger today than it ever was. It's growing and growing and growing. It's part of the retro thing, which in everything retro is sort of, very popular today, but particularly with the Amiga, I think, and the Commodore 64. I mean, you've got to remember there was almost 27 million of them sold around the world. So there's no doubt that a lot of people started their careers using the 64, and they've now developed into big, fabulous jobs and so on and so forth. It's bigger than it ever was, without a doubt. Mm.
Yeah. Well, I would say we're obviously not as big as the heyday of Amiga. When there was, I go to the local newsagents and there'd be racks of Amiga magazines. I mean, my favorite was probably Amiga Shopper. Stupid name, but it was all technical. It was, hardware, software. But there was Amiga World. There was, you name it, magazines.
At one time, there was 13 Amiga-dedicated magazines in the UK alone, with an audited circulation of 680,000 every month. 13, and they never paid a penny in license royalties. Commodore missed out there, you see, you missed out.
Those were the days. However, what we've got now is a vibrant community covering all flavors of Amiga. Amiga's FPGA, emulation, Raspberry Pis, Pi Storms, next generation,
Mister,
classics, everything that Mister,
Mini
Vampires, Mini Migs. There's just everything's an Amiga, and it's quite nice to see Matthew Lehman of Amiga Kit selling their new A600 GS, which is actually a game system, plus it's a desktop computer in its own right, and it's tiny. And I want one because I want to recreate my A4000 Tower in it, because I wasn't really a game player. Because I'm a little older. It's nice when David's around, because I'm not the oldest person in the room.
Yes, I'm an antique, genuine antique, I think.
But I still wasn't really a game player, apart from soccer games. I loved soccer games, so I did. On the Commodore 64 in particular. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But Dave, when we've had these double team talks in the past, and a few things always come up, don't we? And it's always better when we throw out open to the audience, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the best way...
Oh, we've got 2 hands up already. Okay.
have the insight on what's
I have a little insider. For the US, I would like them to go back to the Computer History Museum, and I'm trying to encourage them to do that, because to me it's the spiritual home of the Amiga. It's where it all started, and I've offered to fund the whole thing to get it through. So that's Germany. I'm in touch with Marcus in Germany, Marcus Tillman, and again I've done the same thing because I want them to be, but I don't want them to clash. I want them to make sure we can, have two great shows. I think the Dutch are thinking about sort of coming in with the Germans. So I have a German show, and the Dutch will help because they realised how difficult it was running the one that David was at. It was a fantastic show, but it was really traumatic for them. And I think they're thinking about maybe going with the Germans. I think in the UK, I'm going to be speaking to the people at Kickstarter end of the month. And I don't see why we shouldn't have a really big celebration in the UK, because it's one of the biggest markets for the Amiga. So if we can't at least match the Germans, now I'm not going at the Germans, but if we can't match the Germans, something's wrong, right? And the Americans are the weirdest place because it's a very large country, we know, and it's very difficult to get them to travel. But I think for a big show like Amiga 40, which is very special, really. I mean, 10 years on, people say to me when I go to various conferences, business conferences, and what's your plans for the business in the next 10 years? And I always say, I want to be alive. It's the first thing. So when we did the 30, I thought 40, that's a really big one. Let's go for it. So my hope is that we can really pull out all the stops for the 40. Because
I'd love to see RJ Michael and Dave Haney in the UK.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to go to Germany. I'd like to go to America.
Trevor, I want to ask you a question. Next year is the Amiga 40, which means this year is Amiga 39, and so last year was Amiga 38.
All right, you're right. I'll shut up. Look, I'm not as old as you, but maybe I'm more senile.
I don't know. I had to say that. No, I just want to mention actually because Trevor touched on it. After our management buyout disaster, and it was a disaster, and I was really battered and bruised, and I just got out of the industry completely. I couldn't have done more different things. I remarried. I married a Dominican girl. I lived in the Dominican Republic for 14 months. Then I took her to Australia. We bought a restaurant and ran that for 5 years, and also everything changed completely. And in 2015, out of the blue, I got an email, came in from Volkert de Gans and Marcel Frankenet and
the other guy.
Yeah. Anyway, inviting me to be a speaker at the Amiga 30 event in Amsterdam. And I thought, what the hell am I going to say? I have no idea what I'd even talk about. And they said, how much would you charge? So I thought, 1,000. No, I didn't. So anyway, I got back to them and said, look, I don't know what I'm going to say, but it'd be an honor to speak. I don't want anything for it, but I don't think it should cost me any money to get there. So I said, if you'll pay an EasyJet or Ryanair flight and a cheap bed and breakfast, I'm your man, which was all agreed. It was a cheap B&B. No, it wasn't. Anyway, I walked into that place in Amsterdam, and as God is my witness, I was swamped. Whole horde of people said, can I have a selfie? Can I have your autograph? And I thought, who the hell are they talking about? I had absolutely zero idea that I was clearly held in such high esteem. I just didn't know. I promise you I did not know. It was a real shock, a lovely shock. And that brought me back into the industry again. So I just thought I'd mention that because you mentioned it was really an amazing event. And a couple of months later was the German one, wasn't it? Just a couple of months.
Yeah.
Just, October, I think that one was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I got to know David through those shows, and the 2015 Amiga 30 was kind of a revitalization of the Amiga scene in general, and it kind of re-energized everyone, and that energy has continued to the present day, I think. But we get back to the books, David, all right? Meeting David at the show, we end up being at shows together, and I'd hear Dave's stories, and I think, yeah, these stories are good, Dave, you should tell them. Unfortunately, he didn't tell all the really juicy ones in the book. But maybe you can tell one today. I don't know. Is it being filmed? But his stories are really good. And I thought, look, I write for Amiga Future magazine. I do things called Classic Reflections, and I look at companies and individuals that were involved in promoting the Amiga and what happened to them after the Amiga went bust or Commodore went bust. So I said, Dave, can I do an article with you and Colin? So we did. It was a long article, it was a question and answer session. It made two issues, wasn't it? It was long, and I think that and other people saying, look, you should do a book. So I had the privilege of writing the foreword for your first book. I thought it was the best part of the book, to be honest, the foreword.
Of course he would, wouldn't he?
Yeah. So when
very forward of you.
Yeah, it was very forward. And if you know David, you'll know he does those kind of jokes, don't you, David?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly right. So when he said, look, I enjoyed doing that. I think I'm doing a book about what happened to the technology after Commodore went bust. I said, what do you know about it? And what do you say?
Can I sit where? I said, fuck all. Actually, that's what I said. Because I did know nothing.
And I said, look, I've got all these articles I've written for Amiga Future magazine, under the Amiga Retrospective series. You could have them. I own the copyright. You can have them. And I thought, well, that's it. We'll cooperate. He can take that'll be it, wouldn't it? Mm. About a month later, he said, Trevor, it's very complicated. I said, okay, Dave, what should we do? So that's how we worked out how to start researching and writing for the book. I always knew it was going to be more than one book, sorry.
He never told me.
Well, I knew if we wanted to tell the complete story, it'd have to be a book like this, which we just you couldn't afford. I mean, it would have been, the shipping alone would have been horrendous.
You can't hold a book with bloody 600 pages, 800 pages. You can't even hold it.
Our editor says it's 982 pages it would have been. Mm. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
However, I did see I like to say this because sometimes you only hear negativity. If you look at the forums, don't look at the forums, right? Right. But it was Amazon. There was a review on Amazon for the volume 3 of the book. And I thought, oh, shall I read it? Oh, it's 5 stars. Oh, that's good, I'll read it. So I started to read it, and it said, and it was just all glowing. I thought, did David pay him to write this? Anyway, he said, I read the volume 3 during those week of Sundays from Christmas to New Year. He said, what I want, if I'm ever on a desert island, is all 3 books in one volume. I thought, well, you can't say better than that, really. No, you can't. And so I was really pleased about that. Because you never know how things are going to be received. But I wrote it from the perspective of, if I was an Amiga enthusiast, I want to know the details. I didn't care about the non-Amiga enthusiasts. I didn't write for them. Mm.
Of course. No, I think you have to be at least interested in Amiga to enjoy the books. Whereas I think the Inside Story, anybody could read that because of the nature of the book. You can read it and you get enjoyment out of it. As a matter of fact, I understand that in Poland later this year, they're starting a university course of business studies, and they're using the Inside Story as an example of how not to run a business. So I thought that would be quite interesting.
Dave, that's really... I was involved in a hardware program with young startup companies. They were on a 12-week hardware program, an accelerator program, and they were trying to bring special products to market. It could be anything, right? Mm-hmm. From a special guitar, something, or to rifles, something. There were all sorts of weird things. And so after hours curricular activity, I said, look, I got the first cut of Viva Amiga before it was released. And it was to say, look, you can have the best technology in the world, but unless you apply it properly, being first doesn't mean you're going to win. So I stood up in front of all the young 20-somethings, and I said, who's heard of Amiga? Who's heard of Commodore? Oh, yeah. Who's heard of the Commodore 64? One hand goes up. Okay, right. Think of a time before cell phones, laptops, mobile, tablets, home computers. Think of a time way back. Now watch this film. And I was interested to see how they react to it, because it was only the 1 hour version, not the longer one. It was interesting to see that all their young, youthful ideas about, I'm going to create this product, and everyone will come on and buy it because it'll be the best. And it's not just about that. It's about marketing, it's about support, it's about, you know what it's about.
It's a jigsaw puzzle. And if any one piece is missing, you haven't got the complete picture. And unfortunately, a lot of businesses run like a jigsaw puzzle with a piece or two missing. And they don't look for those pieces. But I'll tell you something that Steve Jobs, you know, love him or hate him, he's famous for his quotes. I don't know if you know that. He's actually written a book of quotes. And there's one quote that he said, which really should have applied to Commodore. And he said, you don't employ smart people and tell them what to do. You employ smart people and let them tell you what to do. Now, Commodore was notorious for its hiring. I'm not kidding. They used a company called Heidrick and Struggles, which is a very internationally known recruitment agency. And they could not have picked worse people if they'd have gone out to do so. I'll give you an example. They hired a new head of engineering. His name was Bill Sidness. And he came from IBM. And his claim to fame was he was responsible for the IBM PC Junior, considered to be the biggest flop in world history of computing. And he was hired as our head of engineering. And I went to America in January of 1993 as vice president of the sales company. And the first thing I did was go in and see the engineers, because I know that without the engineers, we haven't got a business. We had 7 Amiga engineers, who between them, I think, had 3 or 4 junior engineers that worked for them. We had 40 PC engineers in January of '93, when nobody in their right minds was making their own bloody PCs. They were coming out of Taiwan by the boatload. And the reason was because Bill Sidness had given jobs to 40 of his mates. That's why we had 40 PC engineers. I mean, you couldn't invent it, could you? Be honest about it. It's ridiculous. And at the same time, as he recruited Bill Sidness, the president recruited, I can't remember his name, head of manufacturing. And the head of manufacturing said, we was manufacturing the CD32. He said, right, we're not manufacturing them anywhere that you've currently got. We're going to set up a place in the Philippines. Now, I thought to myself, this is really bizarre. Commodore is not selling anything into the Far East. I mean, not just a small amount. We weren't selling anything. So why on God's name would you have a factory manufacturing your product, which is 5 weeks by sea from your core market? It didn't make any sense. Anyway, we found out the reason why he wanted to set up in the Philippines. The company he was working for before was in the Philippines. He was in the Philippines, and he had a mistress there. That's absolutely 100% true.
Steve Jobs, he did say some silly things as well, though. We'll never need colour. Come on. Why is it multitasking? You don't need that. So anyway, but Steve Jobs, I've got a little Steve Jobs story about the Amiga One X1000. So when we started the development of that hardware, we were basing it on a special...
Have you told these people that you're responsible for those? No, they may not know.
Oh, right, okay. I'm the founder of Aeon Technology, and we've produced the Amiga One X1000, the Amiga One X5000, now the Amiga A1222, and some variations of. But the X1000 was back in 2010, and we were basing it on a rather unique CPU called a PA Semi 1685, something like that. It was a 1.8 gigahertz dual core, very low power, very low heat generation, but quite a powerful PowerPC CPU. And the whole plan was based on that CPU. And then Apple bought PA Semi. They didn't buy it for the CPU, but they bought it for PA Semi's low power hardware. Very low power requirement, very low heat generation for their mobile phones and things, right? And we thought, oh, it's okay, we'll still be able to buy them because our hardware partner had a deal with Apple. And they could still buy the CPUs, which were only used by the military and some industrial companies. And then we were told, oh, hang on a second, Apple say you can't buy them. You may have had an order for 2,000 CPUs, 1,800, 2,000, and on 30 days return, so you can order them in batches, but we want to close down the business and you have to buy them up front. And then they said, no, you can't buy them at all. We're not selling to anybody else, it's going to be closed down. So the head of the company that we were dealing with, Varasys, wrote to Steve Jobs directly. And he said, look, we've got this contract for this new Amiga hardware that uses that CPU. We really do need this contract. Can you sell us the CPUs? And he got a one-word reply from Steve Jobs, sorry. So I thought, well, I'm not giving up. So he sent another email. Look, it's really important for our company that we get this contract because we're doing other things and this is an important part of our business. And he got a longer reply from Steve Jobs this time saying, well, if your business just depends on one contract, you're in the wrong business, Steve Jobs. 2 weeks later, the PA Semi people within Apple got permission to sell us CPUs. But they wanted 1,800 up front at $500 each. Now, for the Amiga market, that is, yeah. So eventually, we didn't buy them, but they did sell us one batch, which covered about 125, covered the beta test run, and they gave us details of a stockpiler in Florida that was acquiring these things, would sell them to you at a premium. And we ended up paying for the next two batches $950 each for a CPU.
Ouch.
And then a year later, they came back to us and said, look, we've got an end of year. We were trying to get rid of some of these for the end of year. We're selling them at $600. So we bought a batch at $600. The year after that, they came back to us, can we buy some from you? No, they're all sold. They're all in machines. So yeah, so that was a really interesting, I like the Steve Jobs link there. It's kind of, you don't really think about, he would actually reply.
I'm not sure if you're aware of how dangerous what Trevor's talking about is, because do you remember the time in the early 90s, I think it was, when Intel was eating its own young? It would launch a new chip, whatever was 286, for example, is picking numbers, with certain features, and be selling it for X $100. 4 or 5 weeks later, release a better chip for less money. And they kept doing it time after time after time. And all these people that were stockpiling to making computers with it were left like rotten fruit. Intel was eating its own young. It's a very dangerous game, isn't it, with chips?
It is. So any more questions? Sure.
It's a bit of a slight off-topic question, but when you were bidding for Commodore, what was going on with MOS Technologies? Because obviously, if you haven't got MOS Technologies making the CIAs and the Agneses and whatnot, you've only got a limited quantity of them. So was that was that included in the bid?
No, completely and utterly separate. It was a different company in the group, and it sold. It was the manager and buyer it actually. Ultimately, the whole place has been closed down because it's dangerous.
Yeah, pollution.
Toxic waste in the building. But we weren't using any of those technologies. We'd gone way past that now. Everything had to be, as Motorola or whatever. We'd gone way past that. So it wasn't of any interest to us.
I mean, the custom chips weren't made by Commodore, were they? They were made for Commodore.
Yeah.
I thought they were all made by MOS.
No, nothing of the Amiga was made by MOS. I don't think it was. No, it wasn't. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't believe that was anything from MOS. I mean, MOS was used because of the 6502, and Chuck Peddle came with the deal and all the rest of it, and the VIC-20 and the 64 and history. You got to understand that Commodore's success with the 64 was ultimately its demise, because you can't make that many million computers without lots of money. I mean, there's a lot of conjecture about how many 64s were sold. The actual number was just under 27 million, and I've seen the book, so I know it's true. But Commodore did not declare a lot of the sales because they didn't want to pay the tax on it. A very complicated tax structure with Commodore. But what I'm saying is that when they needed money to make the 64, that's when Irving Gill came in on the scene, and he ended up being a 22% shareholder, where Jack was only 7%, which was ultimately how they had a falling out over a couple of issues, and Jack left in, I think it was January of 1984. I think it was January, maybe February, that sort of time anyway.
More questions?
The idea of naming the chipset come about?
I think it's their girlfriends, isn't it? Yeah, I think it's Denise
Well,
and Paula.
well, Lorraine was the wife of
Jay Miner,
no Morse, Dave Morse.
Right.
That's where the Lorraine name came from, and I think they'd already when they were at Atari when Jay was at Atari they named the chips sets there because there was obviously fewer chips, but the custom chips, but they named them there. But I should know, but I don't.
Well, all I heard, and that was from RJ. RJ Michael is a very, very special man, and if you get the chance to meet him, you should. He's one of those people who self-admits that he's on the border between genius and insanity, and it depends what time of the day you talk to him.
He does have a switch.
He does. He really
you can
does.
go on and off. It's great.
Yeah.
But we have to wind up now because I think that's they want to close and kick us out. We've overstayed our welcome.
Have you enjoyed it? I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.